a Persian soldier survived Plataea. He was found 3 days after the battle, wandering disoriented through the marshes near the Esopus River. He carried neither weapon nor armor. He was one of perhaps 300 men who remained from an army that had once numbered in the hundreds of thousands. He never uttered a word about the horrors he witnessed inside that camp. His name, unsurprisingly, does not appear in any historical record. The Greeks evidently did not deem it worthy of documentation. That stark detail, that deliberate erasure from history, speaks volumes about the brutal reality of what transpired at Plataea. You, no doubt, know the celebrated tale of the 300 Spartans who defiantly held a mountain pass, fighting to the very last man. Thermopylae boasts a film, countless statues, and a cultural afterlife that spans 2.5 millennia. Plataea, by contrast, typically merits a single paragraph in most history textbooks, sometimes even less. There is a profound reason for this disparity. Cultures invariably preserve what they choose to remember. The Greeks, in their collective memory, wished to immortalize the poignant grandeur of sacrifice and noble loss. What they were considerably slower to memorialize was the part where they won completely, utterly, and with a devastating precision that rendered the Persian Empire incapable of ever again launching a mainland invasion of Greece for the remainder of its long history. If you have been watching this channel and have not yet subscribed, this is the very video that will make you regret waiting. Hit subscribe and ring the bell right now. If you have been watching this channel and have not yet subscribed, this is the very video that will make you regret waiting. Hit subscribe and ring the bell right now. Every few days, we meticulously unearth stories like this one from the dusty footnotes of history, the chapters historians have sanitized, omitted, or deemed insufficiently pertinent for posterity. You certainly won't want to miss what is coming next. Now, let us return to Plataea and the pivotal sequence of events that will entirely reframe your understanding of Thermopylae. We are going to meticulously walk through that story. Not the sanitized version where Greeks are infallible heroes and Persians are cartoonish villains. The actual version, the one steeped in mud and gnawing starvation, plagued by squabbling commanders who couldn't agree on anything and ultimately decided by a solitary stone, hurled at precisely the right moment, that irrevocably altered the trajectory of Western civilization. Let us commence from the very moment the legend concluded and the grim reality began. 3 days after Thermopylae, Xerxes himself walked the battlefield. He discovered Leonidas's body amidst the Greek dead. Herodotus, the venerable historian, tells us what transpired next. Xerxes ordered Leonidas's head to be severed and impaled upon a stake. The body itself was then crucified. Now, hold that harrowing image for a moment, not merely for its inherent horror, but for the profound insight it offers into Xerxes's perturbed state of mind. Persian kings did not typically desecrate the bodies of vanquished enemy commanders. Cyrus the Great had famously ordered honorable burials for his opponents. Darius I had followed suit. The mutilation of a fallen king's body was a flagrant deviation from Persian protocol. It was deeply personal. Leonidas and his 300 had, after all, cost Xerxes somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 men. The precise numbers in ancient sources vary wildly, but even the most conservative estimates are staggering for holding a pass that should have been overrun in mere hours. That unexpected delay had afforded the Greek fleet crucial time to maneuver at Artemisium. It had bought Athens precious weeks to evacuate its entire populace. It had, in ways Xerxes could not yet fully calculate, profoundly reshaped the entire architecture of the war. The desecration of Leonidas's body was a visceral response to that profound humiliation. It was also intended as a stark message to every Greek city-state still watching, still teetering on the brink of indecision. This, it declared, is what resistance earns you. The message landed, certainly, but not in the manner Xerxes had intended. The vast Persian army rolled south. Athens, already evacuated on the sagacious advice of the Athenian commander Themistocles, was occupied within weeks. The venerable temples on the Acropolis, the magnificent predecessor to the Parthenon, the treasury buildings, the sacred precincts of Athena, all were systematically razed to the ground. This was no incidental looting. Persian commanders had ordered the systematic destruction of sacred sites as a matter of official policy. It was the ancient equivalent of immolating a nation's very soul and identity. The physical city was reduced to ash. Yet, something profound occurs when you burn a city whose population is still alive and watching, helpless, from ships in the harbor. You do not crush their will, rather, you forge it into a concentrated, unyielding resolve. Here is what most documentaries conveniently skip. The Greek alliance very nearly dissolved completely after Thermopylae. Sparta and its Peloponnesian allies had conceived a stark plan: construct a massive wall across the Isthmus of Corinth, fortify it, and let Persia take everything north of that line, Athens included, effectively defending only the Peloponnese. From the Spartan perspective, this was a strategically defensible position. The isthmus was narrow, the Spartans were undeniably the finest land army in the world, and they believed they could hold that position indefinitely. The Athenians, however, afloat on their vast fleet with nowhere else to go, harbored a decidedly different perspective on this audacious plan. Themistocles delivered an ultimatum that ancient sources describe as breathtaking in its stark, unvarnished directness. If Sparta and the Peloponnesian League refused to fight for mainland Greece, Athens would sail its entire fleet, the largest in the Greek world, west to Sicily. They would simply leave. And without the Athenian fleet, Persia's formidable navy could effortlessly sail around any wall, landing troops anywhere in the Peloponnese it chose. The alliance, in the end, did not dissolve, but this tense exchange powerfully illustrates the volatile texture of the coalition Pausanias was inheriting when he took command, a fragile alliance held together by mutual threat as much as by shared purpose. The number you truly need to hold in your mind is not 300. The truly significant number is 5,000. 5,000 Spartiates, full Spartan citizen soldiers, marched north to Plataea. This was no mere ceremonial force. This represented the mobilization of virtually the entire Spartan warrior class, an event entirely without precedent in Spartan history. Sparta had never before committed so many of its core soldiers to a single campaign beyond its borders. Why does this matter so profoundly? Because to grasp the true significance of 5,000 Spartiates, you must first comprehend what a Spartiate truly was. A Spartan boy entered the agoge, the rigorous state training system, at the tender age of 7. He left home. He slept in sparse barracks. He was systematically trained to endure pain, deprivation, extreme cold, and prolonged discomfort as the baseline condition of his existence. For 13 relentless years, he honed his ability to fight, to move as an indivisible unit, to hold a shield wall under pressure that would cause most ordinary human beings to break and flee. The agoge had a brutal dropout rate. Boys who failed to make the grade became perioeci, free Laconians who fought alongside Spartans but were not full Spartiates. The boys who successfully completed it became something the ancient world treated as a martial category entirely distinct from ordinary soldiers. Each of those 5,000 Spartiates was flanked by approximately 7 helots, agricultural laborers who served as light infantry and crucial support. Conservative estimates place the total Spartan Laconian contingent at Plataea at around 40,000 people. Add to this 8,000 Athenian hoplites, 5,000 Corinthians, and contingents from Tegea, Megara, Phlius, Troezen, Hermione, Epidaurus, Orchomenus, Sicyon, and dozens of smaller city-states. The Hellenic League at Plataea, by Herodotus's meticulous accounting, numbered somewhere between 80,000 and 110,000 men. The commander of this formidable force was Pausanias. He was not, strictly speaking, a king. He was a regent, ruling on behalf of Leonidas's young son, Pleistarchus, who was far too young to command. His uncle had tragically fallen at Thermopylae, a spear still embedded in him, his head grimly impaled on a stake somewhere in a Persian camp. Ancient sources afford us very little insight into Pausanias's interior life at this critical juncture. What we have are his decisions, and his decisions tell us he was operating under a specific kind of pressure that truly has no modern equivalent. He was simultaneously responsible for avenging a fallen king, navigating a fractious coalition of diverse city-states, and confronting the largest military force ever arrayed in the Western world. All at once. He marched his force north to the foothills of Mount Cithaeron, near the small Boeotian town of Plataea, and took up a shrewd defensive position on elevated, broken ground. Across the Esopus River, on the flat plains below, Mardonius was patiently waiting. Mardonius was no fool. He was a seasoned veteran commander who had served Darius I, had survived a catastrophic storm off the coast of Athos that destroyed 300 ships under his command, and had painstakingly rebuilt his career. He was intimately related to the royal family by both blood and marriage. He had aggressively championed this campaign. Some ancient sources even suggest it was largely his brainchild. But Mardonius faced a fundamental problem that no amount of tactical competence could resolve. He commanded an army that was enormously effective on flat, open ground. His cavalry, Bactrian, Persian, and Thessalian, was possibly the finest in the entire world. His Persian infantry, particularly the Immortals, were among the most disciplined and formidable soldiers alive. But the Greeks had cleverly chosen the hills, and Mardonius simply could not compel them to descend into the plains. The Greek position near Cithaeron had one major vulnerability, a single spring, known as the Gargantian Spring, which supplied water to their entire army. Mardonius, a cunning strategist, was well aware of this. His cavalry began a systematic harassment of Greek supply lines, intercepting convoys snaking through the mountain passes, burning precious food, and deliberately fouling smaller water sources. This was not mere battlefield maneuvering, it was a brutal war of attrition. He was systematically attempting to starve and dehydrate an army exceeding 80,000 souls into abandoning their entrenched position. And it was working. The cavalry commander who spearheaded many of these devastating raids was named Mecistius, described by Herodotus as the most admired man in the entire Persian army, physically enormous, armored in a resplendent gold-scaled breastplate beneath his outer garments. In one engagement near the Greek lines, his horse was struck by an arrow and threw him violently. Mecistius landed heavily and was immediately surrounded by Athenians. They could not kill him at first. The legendary gold-scaled armor deflected every blow. It was only when someone finally managed to stab through the visor of his helmet that he fell. The Greeks, reveling in their triumph, paraded his body on a cart along their lines. Herodotus recounts that the sight had a palpable and immediate effect on morale. Soldiers broke from their carefully held positions to gaze upon the body of a man who, just 48 hours before, had seemed utterly invincible. The Persians, upon seeing his body displayed in such a manner, ritually cut the manes of their horses in an act of deep mourning. The pervasive sound from the Persian camp that day, according to Herodotus, was one of profound grief rather than the usual sounds of martial preparation. A small detail, perhaps, but these small things cumulatively accrue. Then, Mardonius's cavalry executed a truly decisive act. They located the Gargantian Spring and utterly destroyed it, collapsing its banks, throwing in debris, rendering it completely unusable. A few days later, a crucial supply convoy winding through the Cithaeron passes was intercepted and torched. 80,000 men, no water, no incoming food. Pausanias, facing a dire crisis, convened a council. The decision that emerged from that council was, strategically, the correct one, yet it very nearly devolved into a catastrophic disaster. They would simultaneously execute a night withdrawal to a secondary position closer to Plataea itself, which boasted better water access. The army would move in 3 distinct columns: Spartans and Tegeans on the right flank, Athenians on the left, and the rest of the Greek allies in the center, falling back towards the town. Night movements with armies of this colossal size in the ancient world were genuinely fraught with peril. There were no radio communications, no GPS coordinates, no standardized signals beyond horns and flickering torches. Moving 80,000 men in the dark in 3 separate columns without losing cohesion required every commander, at every level, to execute their assigned tasks with precise synchronicity at exactly the right moment. That, however, is emphatically not what happened. One Spartan commander outright refused. His name was Amampharidas, and he commanded a Lahos, a unit of Spartiate soldiers. When the withdrawal order was delivered, he stooped, picked up a large stone with both hands, dropped it pointedly at Pausanias's feet, and declared, according to Herodotus, that this weighty stone represented his unequivocal vote against retreating from the enemy. He simply was not going. What followed was a tense argument, conducted in urgent whispers in the dark, whilst the rest of the army was already beginning to move. Pausanias could not simply abandon Amampharidas and his men. Abandoning Spartiates on a battlefield, even a battlefield where nothing was currently happening, was anathema to Spartan culture. But every precious minute spent arguing was a minute the withdrawal was delayed, a minute the carefully laid plan was unraveling. The argument persisted until almost dawn. Eventually, Amampharidas grudgingly moved, albeit slowly, at the extreme rear of the Spartan column, making it abundantly clear through every deliberate action that he considered this a humiliating retreat and was registering his profound contempt for it, whilst technically complying with the order. By the time Pausanias finally managed to get his main force moving, the Athenians on the left flank were also thoroughly confused. They had received conflicting signals and were waiting for clarification that simply was not forthcoming. The Allied center had, for the most part, already completed their withdrawal. The Greek army, which was supposed to pull back as a perfectly coordinated force, was now dangerously fragmented and disoriented, the center near Plataea, the Athenians somewhere in between, and the Spartans and Tegeans still threading their way down from the heights, completely separated from everyone else. And across the river, Mardonius had cavalry scouts who had been watching all of this chaotic unfolding. Dawn broke and Mardonius peered across the Esopus. The Greek camp was partially empty. The heights were half abandoned. Scattered formations were moving in apparent disarray. From where he stood, what he was observing appeared to be a panicked retreat, an army breaking up and fleeing in utter confusion. He crossed the river. It proved to be the final, fateful decision of his life. The Persian cavalry struck the Spartan rear guard first, Amampharidas' unit, still moving slowly, still defiantly making a point. The Spartan column immediately halted. Pausanias dispatched a runner to the Athenians. "We need you on our right." The Athenians began moving towards the Spartans and ran directly into the Theban hoplites, fighting for Persia, who had been advancing on the left. The Athenians were now embroiled in their own brutal fight. The Spartans were alone. What happened next is one of the most meticulously documented and hotly debated sequences in ancient military history, because Herodotus describes something that appears, on the surface, to defy conventional military logic. Pausanias ordered his men to hold position and wait whilst the Persian arrows rained down upon them. He was waiting for omens. Specifically, he was waiting for the sacrifice of a goat to produce favorable signs. The Tegeans, positioned directly next to the Spartans, apparently could not maintain this stoic posture. They were taking heavy casualties. They advanced without orders. And then, at last, the omens were favorable and Pausanias gave the order to advance. The Spartan phalanx in motion is something that ancient sources genuinely struggle to describe in ways that fully communicate what it truly meant to be standing on the receiving end of it. Picture approximately 5,000 men in an impossibly tight formation, each carrying a massive circular shield, the aspes, interlocking with the shield of the man to his left, forming an impenetrable barrier. Each man is clad in bronze armor. Each carries a spear roughly 7 feet long. The formation is typically 8 ranks deep, meaning there are men relentlessly pushing from behind at every point of contact. The formation advances at a steady walk, not a run. Ancient phalanxes did not charge at a full sprint. You simply cannot maintain a cohesive shield wall at a dead run. They advance steadily, under meticulous control, adjusting to the undulating terrain, meticulously maintaining their fearsome line. They walked directly into the Persian infantry. Persian soldiers were not poorly equipped or inadequately trained. Their infantry carried weaker shields, shorter spears, and bows. They were highly effective in open battle under the right conditions, particularly when cavalry could screen their flanks and archers could thin an enemy formation before contact. What they were encountering, however, was an unyielding formation that simply did not thin when you shot arrows at it, because the shields overlapped, and the men were heavily armored, and the formation kept moving relentlessly forward regardless of casualties, because the men behind kept pushing. The Persian infantry, including units of the Immortals, the elite royal guard, fought back with documented ferocity. Herodotus specifically states they grabbed at Spartan spears with their bare hands and broke them. They did not break and run, they died in place. But they were dying nonetheless. Mardonius was mounted on a magnificent white horse, surrounded by his 1,000-man royal bodyguard, the 1,000, fighting in the very thick of the action. This was standard Persian royal military culture, the commander directly in the fray, highly visible to everyone, leading by example rather than directing from the rear. As long as Mardonius was visible and alive, the Persian line tenuously held. A Spartan hoplite named Aramnestus, mentioned by name in the ancient sources, a detail that itself conveys the singular significance of his act, spotted the Persian general through the swirling chaos. He threw a stone, not a spear, but a simple stone snatched from the ground, hurled with every ounce of force he could muster. It struck Mardonius, knocking him violently from his horse. In the crush of fighting around him, the men of his royal guard, unable to extract him, Mardonius was killed. The effect was immediate and visibly catastrophic. The Persian line, which had been holding with grim determination, simply could not hold any longer. Men who had been fighting with their bare hands against Spartan spears turned and ran. The phalanx pushed forward, inexorably, into the gaping space where a defensive line had moments before existed. On the left flank, the story was different, but the outcome was precisely the same. The Athenians were fiercely engaging the Theban hoplites, Greeks who had tragically chosen the Persian side. This was no mere mismatch of equipment or training. This was a grim, fraternal struggle, hoplites fighting hoplites, employing the same formation, the same formidable weapons. Men who, in some cases, had undoubtedly trained alongside each other before the war divided them. The Thebans broke first. Their commanders, the leading families of Thebes who had committed wholeheartedly to the Persian cause, led the panicked retreat. The ordinary Theban soldiers, left without direction, dutifully followed. The Athenians pursued them relentlessly. The Persian army possessed a formidable fortified camp on the Esopus, a large wooden stockade that had served as their operational base for the entire campaign. When the battle broke, the survivors fled desperately for it. The gates slammed shut behind them, trapping them within. There were tens of thousands of men inside that vast enclosure. They had no commander. Mardonius was dead, his body lying somewhere amidst the carnage on the field. The secondary commanders who had survived were frantically attempting to organize a defense on walls that had simply not been designed for this desperate situation. The Tegeans reached the stockade first, breached a section of the wall, and poured inside. The Athenians came next, systematically tearing down sections of the wooden fortifications with the grim efficiency of men who had been learning siege techniques since Salamis. Then the Spartans arrived. Herodotus's description of what followed inside the camp is one of those places where ancient chroniclers become conspicuously terse, a silence that itself conveys a chilling wealth of information. He gives casualty estimates, vague ones, extraordinary ones, and swiftly moves on. The numbers he cites suggest that of the Persian force at Plataea, which he puts at an astonishing 300,000, almost certainly an exaggeration. Something like 3,000 men survived. What we know concretely is that the fighting inside the camp was not a battle, it was an indiscriminate slaughter, men trapped with no formation, no leadership, and no possible exit. The Greeks, pouring in from multiple breach points, filled the entire interior. The wood of the stockade was still burning in places when it was finally over. The looting of a Persian royal camp was unlike anything the Greek soldiers had ever encountered. Mardonius had been traveling with the full apparatus of Persian royal luxury, elaborate tents with gold and silver fittings, sumptuous couches, enormous storage vessels, personal treasuries brimming with riches. The Spartan soldiers who broke into his personal quarters discovered furniture and tableware that, by their own stark accounts, they had no conceivable frame of reference for. Pausanias, according to Plutarch, famously ordered Mardonius's cooks to prepare a Persian royal meal, then had a Spartan meal prepared side by side, and proudly showed both to his officers. The stark contrast, he is reported to have remarked, was the fundamental reason Persia had come so far, to take something the Persians themselves, in their opulence, simply did not understand. Whether that story is entirely true or merely embellished, the very fact that it was told suggests something profound about how the Greeks processed what they found, an opulence so extravagant it bordered on outright decadence. The immense treasure from Plataea was meticulously distributed according to Greek practice. A tenth was sent to the sanctuary at Delphi, a tenth to Zeus at Olympia. The remainder was divided amongst the allied cities. Sparta's share made it, for a time, the wealthiest city-state in mainland Greece. Ancient sources, Herodotus, Diodorus Siculus, make a remarkable claim that historians have debated for 2 millennia. On the very same day Plataea was decided, the Greek fleet allegedly destroyed the remnants of the Persian navy at the Battle of Mycale off the coast of Anatolia. The very same day. This is almost certainly a piece of elaborate mythologizing, coordinating a naval battle in Asia with a land battle in Boeotia on the identical day, with no modern communications, strains the bounds of historical probability. But the fact that the Greeks told the story this way tells you something profound. They needed the ending to be total, simultaneous, a single, monumental moment when everything irrevocably changed at once. The war did not formally end at Plataea in a legal sense. Skirmishes continued. The Greek League would campaign in the Aegean for several more years. Persia did not formally acknowledge the independence of the Greek city-states until the Peace of Callias, decades later. But Persia never sent another army to mainland Greece. Not during the reign of Xerxes, and not during the reign of any subsequent Achaemenid king. That indelible line was etched into the muddy plains outside Plataea on a fateful August morning in 479 BC, sealed when a single stone, thrown by a man named Aramnestus, struck General Mardonius, thus conclusively ending Persia's last great invasion. The 300 at Thermopylae held a pass for 3 days. The Greeks at Plataea held an entire civilization. The reason one of those stories earns the statues and the films, whilst the other typically receives a mere footnote, is a question profoundly worth sitting with. History, it seems, often fails to immortalize what is most profoundly significant. Instead, it meticulously preserves what is most politically or culturally expedient. Thanks for watching. If this is the kind of history you want to see, the parts that don't get conveniently cleaned up, subscribe and join the community. Drop a comment below with other battles you believe history has perhaps misrepresented, or about which side was truly the more dangerous.